Ready to open the hood? Usetool for the tutorials.
And for car parts, the right idea is the Mr. Auto app. Easy, fast, and with better prices than on the website.
You will find the bulk shock absorbers used in the video exclusively on the Mr. Auto website and through the link in the description. Turn your engine off, pull up the handbrake, pull on the bonnet release lever, and open the bonnet. To remove the front shock absorbers, you need to remove the metal frame to access the shock absorber heads. Using a socket wrench and a 10mm socket, unscrew the 5 windscreen frame retaining screws. Remove the metal frame. You can now access the heads of your car's shock absorbers. Then, using a ratchet and a 13mm socket, unscrew the 3 screws holding the shock absorber cups by a few threads in order to create some play for the next manipulations. You must remove the wheels in order to change the front shock absorbers on your car. This will give you full access to the suspension system. Loosen the stud bolts on the front wheels. Lift the front of the vehicle. Place the vehicle on the axle stands. We strongly suggest watching the tutorial, raising your vehicle safely before carrying out this step. Don't forget to slide the wheels under the vehicle. To remove the shock absorbers on this vehicle, the cardon shaft must be removed. During this operation, you will work on the front end of your car. An alignment check carried out by a professional will ensure that your steering system is once again perfectly adjusted and functioning. To unscrew the hub lock nut, you have to prevent the disc from rotating. To do this, insert a thin flatted screwdriver that can slip in between the 2 sides of the disc. You have to insert it in front of the brake caliper mount so that it butts up against the latter. With a breaker bar and a 27mm socket, release the nut from the hub. Now you have to remove the tie rod end. To do this, we recommend watching the video How to Replace the Outer Tie Rod Caddy 3. You must now remove the ball joint attachment from the control arms. Unscrew the 3 fixing nuts on the control arms using a ratchet and a 16mm socket. Using a crowbar, pry the control arm out of the ball joint completely. You now have to remove the upper ball from the sway bar link. It connects the sway bar to the shock absorbers so that the wheels are always in contact with the ground. To do this, we recommend watching the video How to Replace the Sway Bar Links Caddy 3. Brush the screw of the shock absorber base and spray it with degreaser. Then, using a socket wrench, an 18mm socket and an M14 Triple square socket, unscrew the nut from the base of the shock absorber. Then remove the screw. You can use a hammer to help you. Using a socket wrench and a 10mm socket, unscrew the bracket holding the brake and ABS sensor hoses in place. Then remove it. Finish unscrewing the hub screw. Then remove it. You can now remove the drive shaft from the stub axle. Brush the bottom of the shock absorber and spray it with penetrating oil. This will help with the future manipulations. Prepare stable, elevated surface to place all the stub axle once you've removed it. We recommend using the special socket which allows you to further open the stub axle and easily disengage the shock absorber from the stub axle. Then place the entire set on an elevated surface. Finish removing the screws holding the suspension strut support bearing. Once unscrewed, hold the shock absorbers with one hand and finish unscrewing with the other. Remove the shock absorber. In order to change the shock absorber, you must now separate it from the spring. You can find in the description the tool we used in the video, which we think is most adapted to the operation. Careful, pay attention as you compress the spring. This is not without risk and should be undertaken paying very careful attention. Install the shock absorber on the tool, then tighten the mobile flange against the spring, controlling its position carefully. Check that they're properly held by the locking studs, then slowly compress the spring using the socket wrench and the appropriate socket. Once the shock absorber is free in the spring, you can use a 22mm offset wrench and a 6mm Allen key to unscrew the suspension strut support bearing. In the most extreme cases, you have to use an impact wrench. You can also use the specific tool used in the video, which will make your task much easier. Then remove the suspension strut support bearing assembly. Remove the shock absorber from the spring. Then remove the restraint bellows assembly. If it has fallen off during disassembly, refit the lower support to the spring.
All parts used in this tutorial are supplied by our trusted partners. These partners also help us create as many video tutorials as possible. Check them out in the description below.
You will find the bulk parts and products used in the video on the Mr. Auto site and in the link in the description. Take your new shock absorber. Unscrew the lug nut on the stem. Remove the plastic protection. Before installing the new shock absorbers, it is necessary to prime them by pressing the shock absorber rod vertically so that the gas and the hydraulic fluid are separated. Take the support bearing and fit the stop inside. Install the sleeve in the support bearing. Position the shock absorber in the spring and install the support bearing sleeve assembly on the shock absorber rod. Screw the shock absorber rod nut back on. Pay careful attention to place the bottom of the spring so that it supports the shock absorber flange. And finish by screwing in the lug nut onto the shock absorber stem. Make sure it is well tightened. Unscrew the spring compression tool, paying attention to the position of the spring on the lower shock absorber support. You have now finished preparing the new part. A kit connection on the support bearing allows you to install the shock absorber correctly. Insert the shock absorber starting from the top part. Tighten the 3 suspension strut support bearing screws partway. Sand and grease the inside of the stub axle to help facilitate the reinsertion of the shock absorber. Put the special socket back in place to further open the stub axle. Thread the shock absorber base into the stub axle. The lower positioning pin on the shock absorber base must be inserted into the opening of the axle stub until the tab of the pin allows the axle stub screw to pass through. Remove the socket. Put the shock absorber base screw back in place and screw it back on. Finish off the tightening with a torque wrench. Insert the drive shaft into the stub axle. Roughly screw the drive shaft screw back in to hold it together. Place the ball joint holder in the control arms, then screw the nuts back on. Finish off the tightening with a torque wrench. Replace the steering ball in the pivot. Then screw it back on. Finish off the tightening with a torque wrench. Screw the hose mounting bracket back on. Put the sway bar link back in place. Then screw it back on. Finish off the tightening with a torque wrench. Repeat the screwdriver technique to block the rotation of the disc so that you can lock the hub nut of the disc. Finish off the tightening with a torque wrench. Put the wheels of your vehicle back on and lower it to the ground. The final tightening of the 3 strut support bearing retaining bolts is done with the vehicle on the ground and with a torque spanner. Finish tightening the shock absorber head nut with a torque wrench. Put the metal frame back in place and screw the 5 retaining screws back on. Operation completed.
Hi, it's Theo from Usetool. I hope this video has helped you a lot in your car maintenance. We would be super grateful if you could spread the word so that we can produce even more tutorials. Simply give us a like, a comment, and hit that subscribe button. It really helps us boost the channel and help the whole community. Thanks a lot and have a great one.